Hi everyone, welcome to Classics You Slept Through. We are the book podcast where we read classic books. We actually read them out loud to you, although if this is your first time listening to this episode, or this podcast, what are you doing here on episode 27? Go back, listen to some classic books. But if you're a regular listener, you know by now, we read you a classic book and we talk about it. We've recently completed Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey, and I haven't even introduced ourselves. So I'm Kyle Davis, along with a girl who likes to develop as she gets older. That sounds really weird. My sister, Meredith Davis.
Hey, what's up? I don't know if I like to so much as it is forced upon me.
Well, we'll see if our characters developed as they went through this book. Today we are wrapping up Northanger Abbey. So we've gone through a few episodes, and we've talked about the different sections as we've gone along. But on these wrap episodes, we like to take a more holistic approach, a look at the entire book as a whole, not just individual sections, discuss it, and listen to the end. We will reveal our next book and your reading assignments for next week, class.
And that's going to be good because you chose it. We put out a poll. There was a number of people who answered it.
It was a number greater than 0.
We will reveal the winner of said poll at the end of the episode.
Yeah. All right, so Northanger Abbey is Jane Austen's first written novel. However, it was not published until after her death. She had a hard time getting it published. What did you think overall of this book, Mare? And what was your Jane Austen experience? I think we probably mentioned that early on, but just refresh our memory.
Yeah, my Jane Austen experience was Pride and Prejudice. And I did not get it in that I didn't understand that she was funny. Because I didn't used to understand that any old books or old writers could be funny. I thought, the language being what it was very serious to me.
Like dusty book jackets that you read in class.
Yeah.
Of course, they have to be serious.
Exactly. Of course, I also thought The Princess Bride was very serious when I was a kid. But of course I was a kid, and things of princesses and pirates are very serious. It wasn't until I was older watching it thinking, I think this is supposed to be funny. So the same experience basically of Pride and Prejudice, when I listened to it actually is what did it for me, which is why I think reading aloud is so important. When I listened to Pride and Prejudice, I was like, holy crap. This is funny. Because I could hear it. But reading it on my own, I didn't get it. So
you had read Pride and Prejudice, but had you not seen Pride and Prejudice?
No. The movie, no.
Interesting. No. So my Jane Austen experience, obviously, gateway drug, Pride and Prejudice. I started with the BBC miniseries with Colin Firth, which is amazing and excellent, and opened my eyes to this stuff is pretty good. Because, as you said, it's really funny, it's really well done, and it's just a great miniseries. I then later moved on and I read Sense and Sensibility, which, it's been some years since I've read it, but my impression was, yeah, I like it, but it's basically Pride and Prejudice, which, having some perspective of time, unfortunately this is female society of this era, so of course it's similar to Pride and Prejudice. This is what women did, or, the limit of what they could do.
Yeah. It's similar to Pride and Prejudice, but I think Pride and Prejudice is more mature.
Yes, I agree, which we'll get into because, as we said, those books later in Austen's career, writing-wise, Northanger Abbey very early. But so that was the extent of mine. I have not read her other books, so I was excited to read Northanger Abbey. So what did you think overall then?
I think that the book, in some versions, is published in 2 volumes, which I think was smart because I really liked volume 2. I liked getting to Northanger Abbey.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought that section in particular was funny. We spent more time with Kat, the hero, Catherine. We spent more time with Henry, her love interest. We spent more time with Henry's sister, Eleanor, and in what she had hoped would be this amazing Gothic castle or Gothic abbey where she would get to go in every room and look in every nook and cranny and see hidden wardrobes and all of that. And I like that. The beginning, the first volume where we're developing the characters and developing the love interest, sometimes quite quickly, as Jane Austen breaks the fourth wall and says, for sake of developing, I'm not going to go through the history of this character. Here she is, basically.
Right.
I don't know, the dances at the pump room and whatnot.
Interesting. Well, I kind of had an opposite reaction.
Really?
I would have it flipped. I quite enjoyed the bath section much more than I did the actual Northanger Abbey section.
Interesting.
So the bath section I felt was much funnier because we had, for lack of a better term, our comic relief characters of the Thorpes and Mrs. Allen, and just watching Catherine go through her interactions with those folk, I thought was a lot funnier. Whereas the Northanger Abbey section, while it did get a little comical, and it did get a little, slapsticky through the bit where she was thinking that the general, when she's looking through the wardrobe and the chest, and she thinks the general may have killed his wife. Austen doesn't, this book isn't that much of a farce that it is a farce, but it's a realistic one. So Austen doesn't lean into that aspect of Catherine. She redeems her very quickly, and while we're seeing Catherine going through these crazy machinations in her head, very quickly it comes crashing to the ground.
Right.
In reality, no, the general didn't really kill his wife, and Henry doesn't find this funny. He's aghast that you would think that, Catherine, and then she's embarrassed that she's crying. So I was actually found that quite cringy, and I was feeling for Catherine, and I was like, oh, I'm not having fun with this anymore. I'm sad she's going through this. So yeah, I really felt for Catherine and would almost have rather hang out and, laugh at Isabella and John Thorpe.
See, I thought the first part, the bath part, was really cringy. And
really?
I did, because, well, first of all, experiencing the book as a woman, and she practically gets kidnapped by this man who thinks he can just steal her away.
Okay. That part was bad.
Do whatever he wants, and has zero respect for her. How many times did John lie to other people on her behalf and think it was totally fine?
True. I guess I read it more as John was the bumbling buffoon. And if you look at the illustrations that were done for one of the editions that I used for the pod covers, John is depicted as sort of this portly, kind of comically chubby little fellow. He's not like the strapping Henry, and so I read it more as a comical thing. But yeah, the carriage ride was cringy.
And I also thought, looking at the relationship and the friendship of Catherine and Isabella, really made me kind of sad, because I know Catherine, we made fun of her. She didn't know much of the world. And here she's with this horrible person, and she is just grateful to be her friend, and she thinks she's great, and she believes all her expressions of, I'll love you more than my own sister, you're my dearest friend, I'm so loyal. And she believed her. And having been, I would say 17, I was out of that stage, but like middle school, early high school era, that kind of stuff sticks with you. And you have friends like that. I don't know if you did.
I did not have friends, so I avoided a lot of that.
And I don't know if there's a gender divide here, like girls have friends that do this and boys don't, although I think that that's probably a weak divide, though it might be, might show up in other ways with guys. I don't know. You can't play football with us, or you can't play Fortnite. You suck. I don't know. But having those
and
fake
that's true.
friends
I do suck
is
at
terrible.
Fortnite.
And I felt sad for her and angry at the relationship. So I guess, all of these feelings coming up, that's the point for me of reading. So maybe I like it more than I thought. But I was really enticed to read this book by a friend of mine who described the second section, the Northanger section, about how this, young girl was waiting for all of these haunted and creepy things to happen, and they just weren't. And
it was over so quick, though.
I know, the whole second section was over so quick, which, I think the publishers did her a disservice by calling it Northanger Abbey. The original title was supposed to be eponymous of the lead character.
Right.
It was, one name at one point, and then once she named the character Catherine, it became Catherine. And really, that's what the book is about. It's about Catherine. And so if you look at it that way, and you don't section it off, then it only follows that this girl who was so excited to go to Blaise Castle, remember in the very beginning,
yes.
And she's like, "Oh, but can I go all about it? And can I go up in the towers?" And everyone's like, "Yeah, totally. Except we're not going to get there. We're going to turn around after like an hour." Then it makes sense that she did all of these things, and what, I don't know if it makes sense if it got tied up so quickly, but calling it Northanger Abbey is just kind of a letdown.
It is. I mean, it is Catherine's story. And it's really a coming-of-age story because she's 17, and this is her first real time away from home and away from her parents. She goes to Bath, which is, the resort town. This is the beach town she's going to, and hanging out, and she's doing all these things. I mean, she's with Mrs. Allen, but she's mostly unsupervised. She's mostly has the run of this town on her own, and she grows. And she's probably one of the most naive, if not the most naive, Jane Austen heroine. Because if you think about Eliza Bennet, I mean, she comes pre-baked with a good head on her shoulders. Whereas Catherine she doesn't read innuendo. She doesn't read between the lines on anything. Things just go well over her head. She doesn't, she takes everyone very much at face value. And by the end of the story, she's done all these things that she's never thought before that she could do. She's gone on her own in Bath. She's hung out. She's made friends of her own accord with the Tilneys. She didn't need... I mean, if we look, Mrs. Allen, in the beginning, she needed Mrs. Allen to introduce her to someone, to have a friend.
And we know how
that's how she hooked up... Right, that's how she hooks up the Thorpes. But the Tilneys, she went out and made friends on her own. So she's kind of putting herself out there. And...
she takes the post-chase all by herself.
Right. She takes the bus all the way home all by herself. So she's done all these things that, on face value to a modern reader, oh, okay, you took the bus 70 miles, great kid. But to a person of that era, this was a monumental change. I don't know what an analogous thing would be for us.
I mean, driving across country by yourself.
So a few months ago, Spotify was really heavily promoting this podcast called Heavyweight, and the episode that they were using as a hook was about this guy when he was 10 years old. His parents were like, they lived in New York, and he's like, "Hey, go visit your uncle in Connecticut, 250 miles on your bike. Go."
On your bike?
On your bike. So this 10-year-old kid grabs a buddy down the street, and these two new guys that moved into the neighborhood, they didn't even know him. These 4 preteens on their bicycles go ride 250 miles over 3 days, and it's this life-changing experience for him. And he can't, it completely dominated his thinking.
How
for
old
years
was?
And years and years.
What year was this?
Mid-70s, early 70s, mid-70s. Yeah, it's a really cool episode. I quite enjoyed it. Cross-promotional. And I was shouting out Spotify podcasts like they need extra advertising. But it was a really good episode and really interesting and a life-changing experience. And so this, Catherine, what she has gone through between being in Bath and the Northanger Abbey experience and the trip home, I think is going to have a similar effect on her. I mean, if she never leaves Woodston on her own again, she'll be 75 in Bath telling the kiddies about when she took post-chase all by herself from Northanger back to Fullerton,
And I think to that point, what she goes through and then what she goes through with Henry and his realization about, I mean, he knew what his father was like, but he really got a taste of his father when he treated Catherine the way he did, kicking her out. And then they've gone through this experience together, and at the end of the book it makes a point like they're quite close now. Are they as close as they would have been had they not had this experience, and are they closer for it? And then it makes the argument, does this book now promote filial disobedience or
a strict
parental tyranny,
strict father,
because it turned out so well for the both of them, and they're so close because they've gone through some sort of small trauma together and some sort of growth. I don't know how much Henry has grown. He's just glad to have a woman who he thinks is empty, and he can just fill her up with all kinds of glorious ideas. And she can be Mrs. Allen and parrot back everything he says. Although I don't know if that will happen to Catherine. Maybe not.
I hope not.
If Jane Austen were to write a second book, she wouldn't. She wouldn't do that. They read too much.
2.
Northanger 2. Cat 2. Cats 2.
So that's Catherine, our main heroine. What about the other characters in the book? She has some character growth. I think you could make an argument that Henry Tilney, in the disobedience of his father, or the perhaps not outright disobedience, because they do wait for his permission, so he doesn't outright disobey him, but he at least confronts him and pushes back on
in a way he never has before.
Decision. Right. So I think you could argue at a very minor sense in the final pages. We don't really see it so much as we're told in a page or two, like, here's what happened. So I think you could argue he's had a little bit of character growth.
I think if we were able to follow James, her brother, he probably, we don't see it, so then, there is no character growth because he's not a real person and he stops the moment the words about him stop. But if they didn't, and we can project into a fictional world in that way, he's had a traumatic experience, falling in love with someone, and he thinks that's it, and he secures an annual income from his family, and he really puts himself out there for Isabella, and he thinks that that's it. And then it's not that they break up and, it's mutual.
He's been burned.
Yeah, it's a serious, and to Henry's point, he makes a point that I'm sure Isabella did not break off her engagement from James until she thought she had secured one from Frederick.
Right.
Because that would be disastrous. It was disastrous, but I'm inclined to believe Henry here. So Isabella is engaged to two people in the midst of trying to break it off. And how does James find out? I don't know if James finds out by her breaking it off. I think he probably finds out
by her making the new one.
Yeah. And it comes through the grapevine because she seems to not have talked to him. She's like, he had a cold and when he went away or something.
Right. Please put a good word in for me, because she obviously can't. She's got no contact.
So I would think he would have grown. Probably has. And his mother says almost as much, like, maybe he'll make a better choice next time.
Right.
We're not so sad.
But he is not really a character even. He is more just sort of a name that's there, because if he gets 5 lines of dialogue, that would be excessive, I think. He doesn't really speak the entire book. And yet, I would argue that the rest of our characters are not so much characters as they are caricatures.
Yeah. Especially Isabella and her brother.
Right, so the Thorpes are really the most cartoonish of any of the characters in the book here. Very cliche, just social climbers, very, very silly, very insincere. Neither of them really mean what they say, and they don't change throughout the book.
No.
Mrs. Allen has a few lines of comedic dialogue as we're to laugh at her empty-headedness. Mr. Allen just sort of harumphs and puffs his chest out or whatever every once in a while, and then leaves to do something else as the silly women keep talking. So everyone else sort of just flits in and out of the pages of the book. And so really only characters would be Henry, Eleanor, and Catherine.
Yeah. And Eleanor, even a lot of her a lot of the action and depth that I felt from her happens off screen, so to speak, in the quick, like, oh yeah, so she's got this love interest and his servant left behind these laundry receipts. Surprise. And, maybe they, Eleanor was the one who had the idea to write to her in secret under the cover of the name Alice. Where'd she get that idea? Perhaps she's been writing to her lover under the secrecy of some other name because she's, had this interest for a while. Other than that, she's basically just a cliche of a doting female character. In this case, she dotes on her brother. She follows him around.
And I wonder if in a later Jane, if a more mature Jane Austen, mature writer, if in a different version of Northanger Abbey, if we would have gotten, say, while Catherine's at Northanger, the Viscount visits for dinner or something, and maybe she doesn't quite pick up on something between Eleanor and the Viscount, but we as the reader would.
Well,
and later Catherine...
That would certainly be the case. Catherine wouldn't pick up on anything.
Of course not. She doesn't pick it up with her own. When they're talking directly to her.
They're buying new china. I want my son. Oh. You can have this cottage, basically. She's like, that's weird.
Why would he say that? Huh.
And yet, she can't figure that out. And yet, she projects so much. Why doesn't he want to go on his wife's favorite walk? He probably killed her. He hated her.
That's immediately what I would jump to. Yeah.
Or she's locked in the house somewhere, buried in the walls.
Yeah. All right. So then that kind of brings us to the setting of this book. So we have two main scenes. I mean, you can kind of throw Fullerton in there for a third right at the end, but you have Bath and you have Northanger Abbey. So what did you think of those?
Well, I thought Bath was really interesting, and we did some research on the bathhouses and the natural springs, and just this idea that they, you get all dressed up and you march around the pump room or dance around the pump room and drink water. I mean, natural spring water. It's not just because you're thirsty. I guess there was a medicinal draw to it.
Right. All the way back to Roman times.
Yeah, exactly. And notwithstanding the cinema interpretation, the film interpretation that Mom told us about of them actually standing in water. Like they're just floating around a pool, which would be weird. And thinking of Bath as this resort town where, interestingly enough, we're going to see that kind of return in our next book. At least in part.
A little teaser.
Yeah.
Do we go to Bath again?
Different continent. No. Different continent.
Okay.
More towards the bayou kind of deal.
Oh, interesting.
But then Northanger, I mean, it could have been interesting. I felt Catherine's disappointment in that she was ready for it to be this Gothic place, and here it was actually had some quite modern pieces, and the disappointment you feel when somebody remodels their original home from 1800s and gets out all the quirks and puts all kinds of modern stuff in it. Let's take out all these walls. Let's make this all open concept. Which I have this theory that open concept is going to go out of style soon, and people are going to be putting up walls all over their houses because they don't want to see everything all the time in their house.
Well, it's cheaper for the contractor to build an open concept house, that's for sure.
Yeah, to build one, not to make one that's not already there.
Well, right, yes.
It's got to bust down all the walls. I don't understand why everybody wants open concept. I mean, I get their excuses, but when your kitchen's filthy, you can't ever not see it. Or if you've got laundry in the living room, you always have to look at all of your filth.
Exactly.
There can't be a messy room. And there's no way your house stays staged like at the end of Property Brothers.
No.
It doesn't happen that way.
No.
Anyway.
So I thought, I enjoyed, I kind of said I liked the first part better. I liked Bath as a setting better as well. So this is the first book that I've read where we actually go to Bath, right? So I've read a lot of books where they mention Bath, they talk about Bath, and so I knew Bath as a place in England. But this was the first one where the characters actually went to Bath, and I got to see what it was like. And, I really enjoyed it, but I could feel, even in Austen's writing, as Catherine got towards her end of her time in Bath, the 6 weeks or so that she spent there, that she was ready to be done and the fatigue was setting in. And it's like, can we be just done with this? And, I think about if you go on a vacation in the States, like it's very much a dance to figure out, because you want to leave and end your vacation still enjoying the vacation, right? Like if you visit someone's house or if you go someplace, you want to go with things left. So you leave with a good feeling. You don't want to overstay your welcome because that sours your time there, like you're ready to go. And I think about going to like a resort town or, an amusement park or something like that, and how you look at it as you're so excited to get there and you have all these thoughts and these dreams about going, and then when you get there, it's kind of a disappointment. Like I haven't done, so I did Disney World when I was in high school, and you're all excited to get there, and you get there and you're like, it's an amusement park. Okay. I mean, it's got cigarette butts by the side of the walkway, just like at Hershey Park. I mean, okay, whatever. Did I have to come to Florida for this? It's a long way. So I haven't done like the Disney World with the kids where you do all the planning and everything. And the idea of it is amazing. But I know like once you get there, it's like, oh, it's August and it's hot and the kids are sweating and they want the $5.50 for the ice cream. And you're like, I don't want the Mickey Mouse ice cream for $5.50. Come on, kids, let's get out of here. Let's ride your stupid ride. And then, you stand in line for an hour to ride a ride for 5 minutes. And so I was kind of feeling those emotions coming forth in the Bath section.
I feel like a good time to end a vacation, Ben and I, my husband, always say, like, when we're having a good time on vacation, it's time to leave. We know it's been good if we look at each other and we're like, one more day. We wish we had just one more day.
Time to go.
Yeah. But there's definitely been times where like, oh God, one more day. Can we just go?
Yes. Never overstay your welcome.
No.
Definitely.
No. And anytime, we didn't take vacations as kids because we didn't. No, we couldn't.
We didn't.
But we did go to like Hershey Park, and we went to DC, and we went to Baltimore, and we went to the zoo.
Shout out Dutch Wonderland.
We've done Dutch Wonderland. I took Ellen to Dutch Wonderland.
Sesame Place.
I haven't done Sesame Place yet. Not yet.
We did Sesame Place. You were maybe a baby.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But we did Sesame Place.
I just remember the Hershey Park trips. But I also, as a kid, wanted all of the extra things. I wanted the $5.50 ice cream, and I wanted it.
Yeah.
But our family was the family who had to pack the peanut butter and jelly and have the picnic in the car. And I couldn't get the light up thing on the stick, and I couldn't get all of these extra things. So when I take my son and if I get him something, I'm like, am I ruining him? I never got any of that stuff. And it's probably better that way. Should I say no?
You don't need that. Come on.
Yeah. Well, now we're not going anywhere. There were no vacations this summer. Nothing is happening.
Mm-mm.
Nothing. At all. Vacation was canceled.
Take the kids to the woods and we walk. Hiking is an easy, free one you can do.
It's not a vacation. It's a hike.
It's a hike. Well, you got to take them far away to hike. Take them to a national park. That's the way to do it.
Yeah.
Support the National Park Service, people. Buy an annual pass. Get out there. Enjoy our national parks. It's our nation's beauty.
I wanted to do that. I had a whole big plan in October. I was going to go to Yellowstone with friends and their family and our family, and we were starting to plan it and look at Airbnbs. This is back in January. In February, we were planning it.
Yeah.
And then it was no go.
Not happening.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so that's the setting of Northanger Abbey. What about themes we can pull out of this book? So we have a little bit of, Austen explicitly telling us what she's thinking vis-a-vis especially novels and the novelist and society. And she has a couple of fourth wall breaks in here.
The fourth wall breaks, and she speaks through Henry and Catherine, who share an affinity for novels. And Henry proposes that if they were to try to get into a game of who's read what and who's read more, then he would leave her farther behind than he can't even say because
can't even think.
It would be it would be too much. He couldn't think of a simile for it. But
in a hard contrast with John Thorpe, who does not read novels at all.
Unless they're by Anne Radcliffe.
But he didn't remember that.
But he didn't remember that Udolpho was by Radcliffe.
Oh, yeah. That one.
Oh,
yeah. I like that.
Of course
one.
she did.
Yeah.
Yeah, she really pushes novels because they were thought of as like, I like in the...
Apparently feminine. She associated very much with women read novels, and that was kind of it.
And it was frivolous. It wasn't intellectual. It wasn't, why would you read novels? I liken it to reading romances today. I wouldn't read a romance. I wouldn't read Twilight. Back in the day when I lived with our Aunt Mary Beth, every Tuesday she got the new romances. And she was sick and recovering from cancer at the time. Shout out, if you're 50 or over, go get your colonoscopy. You should. Chadwick Boseman, Aunt Mary Beth.
American medical system does not let you check anything unless you have... Anyway, we do it.
Anyway.
Why the American medical system sucks podcast later.
That's a lighthearted one. Anyway. That would be cheery.
I know, right?
Anyway, she was recovering back then, and some days she would have some bad days, and she couldn't go out herself, and so she would give me a list of new romances that I had to go to, like, the last remaining Walden books, or
like she actually knew the title. Like,
oh yeah.
Okay, so these are just paperback novels. Like, if she knew ones that were coming out.
Oh my gosh, like she knew the authors, the titles.
Wow. There's
all kinds of different like branches. There's like stay-at-home moms that have the work, like the like who get seduced by the werewolf, but then the firemen too. So there's like really interesting genres within
the werewolf and the fireman in the same book.
No, separate books.
Oh,
I don't know. Maybe the fireman is the werewolf.
That was a crossover. That was a summer crossover event.
But she would send me to go get them, and here I am trying to get my master's degree in literature, and I'm like, and I already said I'm a snob, so whatever, hate mail, come my way. But I would like take my little Post-it note, like look around, go to the romance section, because it was a whole section, and I would take them up and pay for them, and just, I've never did it, but I felt compelled to be like, these aren't for me.
They were judging you.
Not mine.
Judging your book choices. We do not book shame on this podcast, people. And when I publish Fire Hoses and Full Moons, you all better buy it and read it.
Fire Hoses and Full Moons. Oh my god.
It's my new werewolf fireman crossover romance fiction genre.
I could just see the cover now. A very hairy...
Oh, you don't want to see that.
Ripped shirt.
Cover.
Werewolf. Hairy but plenty of muscle scene with a fire hose draped over his arm.
Yeah, exactly.
And a woman on the other.
He's carrying her out.
And her babies.
There was a fire in the house of his crush, like the woman he's pursuing. And the fire started, and it's on a full moon, and he's all worried.
Didn't know what
because he doesn't want the rest of the crew to know. And so he goes in to the house to rescue her. And as he's coming out, the moon comes out from behind a cloud, and he's changing as he's carrying her out. And now his whole fire crew sees him.
And he's like, no. And she's like, yes.
Oh man, I'm doing this. I'm running with this. Amazon self-publishing. Here I come.
Oh my god, you're gonna be so rich.
I am. It's gonna be crazy.
You could take a whole summer in Bath.
I'm unemployed. Why not? This is what I'm gonna do with the rest of my life.
Dude, those things sell. Aunt Mary Beth had them. I kid you not. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Oh, I saw.
Stacks of books.
I saw.
Like, simultaneously, and she would open them across each other like little A-frame tents, and that's how she would keep their page, because she was reading like 50 at a time.
When she says stacks, she means stacks of open books laying on each other, because she was
reading them
using the books to hold each place in each book. It was insane.
And then after she read them, she would burn them or throw them away. That was it.
Wait, what?
She wouldn't donate them. They would use them. I'm so sorry, Uncle Steve, if you listen to this podcast. I'm giving away your secrets. But they would put them in the the fire thing, not the fireplace, but they had a wood burning stove. And so they would just use it as kindling or just throw them away
right.
once she read
Why
them.
Not?
She also had a Kindle, and she had a ton of them on there.
Wow. Can't burn that.
No.
Burn.
I was like, you sit around all day reading romance novels. What kind of state do you spend your day in? Come on. Is that home all by yourself?
Well, whatever it is, I got to get into it if I'm going to write these books.
Yeah, seriously.
All right, so we got novels as a theme. We also have, her critiques of her society, which is, really Austen's wheelhouse. All her books are critiquing society in one way or another. And in this one, a lot of her critiques revolve around, we've got the silliness of frivolous women, right? Because you have Isabella Thorpe and you have Mrs. Allen, kind of the other two female characters we have in this. And they are not painted in a good light at all.
No, she's not advocating for them.
Right. So even though Catherine enjoys the balls and she enjoys the amusements of Bath, once she leaves Bath, she's like, okay, that was fun. I'm good.
Yeah.
She's not obsessed with it, where Isabella, even in the midst of, sending her the, I want James back, please, my heart is broken. Oh, by the way, I saw this great thing in the store and I went and I bought it and it was terrific. And, this dress that I wore, and then I went out with these other folks, and yeah, I know they thought I was silly, but they invited me out anyway. And so Austen is really digging into them. And then Mrs. Allen, the older version of Isabella, who has no opinions of her own and just, is an empty shell that just makes observations at random. I
think Jane Austen really highlighted the dichotomy there, or the two sides to that, in that she had this great quote that struck me that I did on one of the episodes about small talk, basically, with somebody new that you meet. It can be empty and frivolous and simply just inane small talk, or it can actually be some sort of, relationship foundation making conversation. They could be the same types of questions and the same types of words that you're saying, but the care and the interest behind it is what matters. And that's what she found she had when she was talking with Eleanor. They said nothing that was new when you meet someone, and yet it meant so much more because it was said between people who actually cared. Yeah, the sincerity there.
And that's also with Henry Tilney, with the first time she meets him, they hit it off and they're getting to know each other. And, he cheekily says, oh, wait, I forgot to ask you all the Bath questions. Right. How long have you been in Bath? How are you finding it? Where you stay? And he's going through the small talk, how's the weather questions when you meet someone. And, she's loving it. She's cracking up laughing.
Yeah.
Because she's realizing, like, oh, yeah, you're right. This is observational humor. Everybody says that.
And yet, it's interesting when you have someone that's you actually connect with when you say those things.
Right.
Because people don't have to ask you anything. That's what I think of sometimes. No. Like, people say hello, and then sometimes, like, my neighbors are like, hi, how are ya? And I love the how are you part, but I always forget to answer it. Yeah, I always forget to answer it. Yeah. I'm just like, hey.
Hey.
Because
I find that when somebody says hello, I say, hey, how's it going? And you just walk past. I don't know, you don't really actually want to know how's it going. They're not gonna actually tell you. It's like,
I've been better.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
actually,
I didn't really want to know.
You just hold them there like, oh God.
Why did I ask that?
Yeah, why is it like such a common thing to do, is to say, how's it going, or how are you doing, or whatever. I don't think.
We feel we have to fill dead air. We have to have something. You can't just have silence or just a simple acknowledgement.
I think I just wave at people.
It's polite. I mean, it's politeness. We at least have these forms of polite society, even in our modern society.
We do.
Yeah.
I didn't have anything intelligent to follow that up with other than we do.
Well, it's not quite so formulaic, as in British society or in older society.
Yeah.
I always remember when the first time I read The Hobbit, and the dwarves are all coming over to Bilbo's house. Yeah. And, they introduce themselves and they say, oh, at your service, sir. And Bilbo always responds, oh, at yours and your family's. And I always thought that was like, oh, there's a formulaic response to at your service. Oh, this is a thing you have to say. I think other cultures are more in tune with that than Americans and American English, So, my wife and I learned Arabic some years ago, and it's very formulaic responses. And when you meet someone in an Arab culture, there's 4 or 5 just formulaic questions you just spit out, and neither of you, and you're both asking them at the same time. Neither of them's actually answering them. It's just what you do when you meet someone.
What is it? It's like, hi, how's your family? Or
yeah. Basically, it's it's hello, how are you? How's your family? How's your health? How's things? And you're welcome here. Your family, please be at ease. Come and you sort of spit these things back and forth for 30, 40 seconds.
It seems nice though.
I mean, it
feels
fun
very warm to say those.
As a second language speaker.
Yeah. To watch children who don't have that yet, Vincent's just like, hi, do you want to be my friend? How was your day? What are you doing?
Yeah.
Can I have that?
Yeah.
And other kids who are a little bit older are like, dude, back up.
What? Yeah.
And other little ones in kind sometimes are like, this is amazing. You too? All right, that's it. We're best friends.
He does lead with that what are you doing? That is one of his first questions, isn't it? Yeah. What are you doing? Well, I just arrived. I'm just sitting here, man. What are you doing?
I did teach him to introduce himself a long time ago, and he would introduce himself and me to everybody. Oh. And he would be like, I'm Vincent. This is my friend, Mommy. And I'd be like, hello? Hello, plumber.
Friend.
I'm Mommy.
Didn't actually kidnap him. I'm actually his mother.
And one time we had people come to do replacement windows in the house, and he met, I don't remember the guy's name, John, we'll say. And he was like, I'm Vincent. This is my friend, Mommy. I love you. And I'm like, dude, we just met the replacement window guy. I need you to bring it down a notch.
So when we had people come over, so anytime someone was coming over to the house, we had to our youngest very specifically tell him, all right, bud, now we don't hug people we just met. Okay, you can ask for a handshake, but don't hug and don't touch other people you just meet, okay? And we'd have to go over and over it with him. And he would go up and he'd tell, guy comes in to, fix the garage door or something. He's like, hi, can I give you a hug? And the guy would be like, sure. And he'd just give him a hug. Suddenly he was a best friend.
There's like a line I want to toe with that. Like, I don't want him to be so trusting that he's like, yes, I'll get in the car with you. But I also don't want him to be so distrusting that he loses the interest in other people and the friendliness as he gets older. And
you don't want to crush his spirit.
Right.
But, hey, bud, there's some limits here.
Yeah.
This is how we interact this is how adults in our society interact. And we just don't do that. That's how we phrase it.
So sweet.
They are. All right, so anything else about Northanger Abbey you want to talk? We liked it. I'd say I give it a thumbs up.
Yeah, I'd say I stayed awake.
A sleep through or stayed awake? I stayed awake. I enjoyed it. I definitely stayed awake in the beginning, and I didn't think it... I thought it moved too quickly at the end.
Yeah.
I thought she wrapped it up too succinctly. I actually wanted it to be longer.
Yeah.
But it is her first novel, so I guess it makes sense.
Yeah. I think she made mention of it a few times. Like, you'll see from the lack of pages that we're about to wrap this up.
Right.
So, I mean, at least she brought attention to it, which I respect. But I stayed awake. I liked it.
Right. Well, I was just about to say, so something I should have researched it before the pod, but this is live as it's happening, folks. So I looked it up. Northanger Abbey is a much shorter book at almost 78,000 words, and her other books, Emma is 155,000. Mansfield Park is 159,000.
Yeah.
So those are definitely much larger. Pride and Prejudice, 120,000. Sense and Sensibility, 119,000. So yeah, so definitely Northanger Abbey, quite short. She wrapped it up quickly.
Yeah.
So I think she learned pacing a little bit better as she matured as an author.
Agreed.
Well, speaking of authors. We just read Jane Austen was our first female author we've done for the pod.
True.
Because we had Jack London and then Kafka, and then we had H.G. Wells, and then Jane Austen. And so we're going to keep that theme, and we're going to do another female. So our next book is...
The Awakening. Oh, I missed the drum roll. God, I'm so
That was the drum. Yeah, I was doing a little drum roll.
Now it's just going to sound weird.
or as suddenly a Spaniard, number one, my R.
The Awakening by Kate Chopin.
Excellent. So we put out a poll, and that is what won. We actually had a bunch of folks vote. So if you're not following us on Twitter and Instagram, why not? What's wrong?
I try hard at that.
CYST pod. Let's get on that right away.
Yeah, the choices were The Scarlet Letter or The Awakening.
And The Awakening.
And you woke folks chose The Awakening.
So that's what we're going to be reading for next week. So we're going to start off with the first 12 chapters. So if you're reading along at home, your reading assignment for next week is chapters 1 through 12. And that will be in your feeds next week. So we're not going to have... This is our last episode this week. I'm still in transition. We're staying with some friends. We're going back to our short-term base at the mother-in-law's. And then we're finally getting into a place in a few weeks. So we will do the read aloud readings for next week, and so you'll see those in your feed. But again, if you're reading along, chapters 1 through 12. And I have not read this book. You have read it, obviously.
I've read it lots of times, and I love it.
You've read it lots of times. All right, so I am interested to read it because half of this project of this podcast is me reading things I've never read before. And hopefully that's why you're listening, because you've never read these things either. And now we're reading them to you.
Yay.
Yay. So as I mentioned, get on our socials. We are at CYST Pod on Twitter, Instagram, and the Facebook. And you can also write to us. Give us your thoughts on Northanger Abbey. What'd you think? Are you excited for the next book? Or any other books you want to see after Awakening? Because Awakening is going to be about 3 weeks of episodes. It's not an overly long book. So we're going back a little shorter from the short Northanger Abbey. So it'll be about 3 episodes of Awakening to read through that. But you can hit us up on email, cystpod@gmail.com, and we'll get to it and read some more books together.
Let's do it.
I like it. So this has been Classics You Slept Through. Soccer tryouts are going to be after school today, so meet in the cafeteria at 3 and bring your cleats.